Hey everyone, Ralph here. In this video, I'm going to show how easy it is to build this embedded Shopify app that allows merchants to generate blog articles using OpenAI. This embedded UI will give them the capability to provide an author, the length of the blog post, the title of it, as well as a description of what they want that to be. If they want an image, they can select that and provide the image description. And our app is going to take that, send it off to OpenAI that generates a blog article and an image, and then we're going to upload that to Shopify. All of that happens automatically when a merchant clicks this button right here. And in Shopify, they get this blog article that they can review, publish to their website, and then we have a blog article on their website within a minute of them typing this up in their app that we're creating today. Now, that's going to take just 30 minutes to teach you how to do that. And then at the end of it, you're going to have built this by yourself. And if you're into Shopify app development, I'm just going to go ahead and plug Gadget's upcoming hackathon called the Future of Code. It runs from May 13th to May 20th. It's 100% remote. It's 100% free. We've got $5,000 worth of prizes. One of the tracks that you can compete in is called Best Use of AI. So who knows, in this tutorial, you might get the idea of a winning Shopify app in this hackathon. So make sure to go to gadget.dev/hackathon to register for free today. But that's enough of talking. Let's get into the tutorial and teach you how to build this app. Let's go. All right, so let's get going. We're going to start by building the backend of our application. Then we're going to install that on a store. We're going to take the front end that we get out of the box, change that to show this embedded form that allows merchants to type in whatever they want their blog to be about, send that back to our app backend that sends that off to OpenAI that generates the blog article and the possible image, and then our backend is going to upload that to Shopify. So to do all of this, we're going to use gadget.dev. If you're not familiar with Gadget, it is the fastest way to build Shopify apps. It's a fully hosted, full stack app development platform. It's free to sign up for, so go ahead and go to gadget.dev to sign up for free. I actually have an account because I work at Gadget, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit log in here and create a new app. And this is the screen that you should be seeing once you've completed the sign up flow, and it's just asking you to name your Gadget app. I'm going to name mine GPT-4 blog tutorial and then hit get started. And what Gadget does here is that it spins up a fully hosted app backend and front end that you can build essentially any web app with, but we're obviously going to be building a Shopify app here today. So I'm just going to go ahead and click connect to Shopify here. We have two options here. We can select the partner dashboard route or the store admin route. I always suggest using the partner dashboard unless you have very good reasons for using the store admin. Store admin is more restricted, and with the partner dashboard, you can essentially build any type of Shopify app, including UI extensions, public apps, etc., that isn't possible with an admin app. And then Gadget is asking for a Shopify client ID and a client secret. So to get that, we need to go over to our partners account in Shopify. So that's shopify.com/partners. If you don't already have an account, sign up for one. It's 100% free. I have one, so I'm just going to hit log in. Again, if this is your first time using this, head over to stores, add a store, because you'll need one to create or to install the app that we're creating on. I have a bunch of stores, so I don't need to do that. So we're going to go ahead and click apps here in the left-hand menu. Then we're going to click create app and create app manually. And then I'm just going to call this GPT-4 blog tutorial and then hit create. And once we've done that, we have our client ID and client secret that Gadget is asking for. So I'm just going to copy paste those over to Gadget and then click connect. And the screen that you get here is essentially all of the various Shopify API scopes that you can use when you're building Shopify apps in Gadget. So you see there are plenty of them depending on what you want to use. So I suggest that you think about what is it that your app is supposed to do? What data does it need from Shopify? What capabilities do you need to have write data back to Shopify? In our case, we want to write blog posts. So I'm going to search for blog. We see that there's this content API scope here. I'm going to select right here and then click blog and article. Imagine that you needed customer, products, etc. You have them in here as well. And if you're not sure what you need to use, select whatever makes sense for you now. You can come back and edit and add and remove scopes in the future. So just go with what you're sure that you need. We don't need anything else than this. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. If you're building a public Shopify app, there's also some other resources that can be useful, such as if you want to set up billing, etc. We don't really need that for this tutorial, so I'm just going to skip those and click confirm. Now, there's one thing that Gadget does for you now, which is spinning up these data models that correspond to the scopes that we selected. So you can see that there's Shopify blog and Shopify article here, which are two data models that now are wired up or will be wired up to the Shopify API and have the capability to store all of the data that Shopify has on these records, as well as when they emit webhooks. So we don't have to wire up a database ourselves, that exists right there. And the next step that we're going to do, and we're going to have a look at those in a minute, but the next step that we're going to do first is that we're going to copy this app URL and sort of tell our Shopify app here where on the internet our backend and front end lives. It's gonna go ahead and paste that into the app URL and then copy the second one here, the allowed redirection URL. Paste that in here and hit save. Once that has saved, we're gonna click overview and then we're gonna go ahead and install this on a store. This is why you had to create a store previously if you hadn't already done it. And I usually just go ahead and open that in a new tab in case I would need this later. And then you just select which store you want to install it on. I'm going to select this Catalina wine mixer, which is my favorite test store for no reason whatsoever. Just going to hit install app. And if you have created Shopify apps in the past, you might say, what about setting up OAuth? What about webhooks? What about all of those things? Well, with Gadget, you get that all out of the box. So it's already configured the second that you create your Shopify connection. So we can just go ahead and install this and it just works out of the box. And what you're seeing here now is Gadget's default template for an embedded Shopify app UI. So you get that out of the box as well. Every Gadget project that you create for Shopify automatically is ready to pass the technical requirements for the Shopify App Store. All you got to do is add your UI and whatever you want your backend to do. Just want to show you something here as well. So this page right here is powered by this page right here in our front end folder. So we can go ahead, if you look at this right here, we can just go ahead and change this. Successfully connected to Shopify. Let's go ahead and say, yay, that's great. And if we flip over here, you can see that it's here. So we have something called hot module reloading in Gadget, which during the development process makes it easier as you essentially code. You can see it update automatically. You don't have to deploy, it's just there. It's updated live on the internet. What we're going to do next is essentially replace this embedded UI with this form that allows merchants to say what they want their blogs to be about. And then we're going to hook that up to some backend logic that we'll create that essentially does the orchestration with OpenAI and creates the blog post in Shopify. So to do that, we're going to head back over to Gadget and figure out like, okay, we want to replace or we want to add some pages in here. So I'm just going to dismiss that. So in the app page here, I'm going to go ahead and replace that. And I'm just going to copy paste code now because if I wrote it all from scratch, it would take too long. I'm going to comment on some of the code, and all of the code that I'm using is available in the link in the video description. So what we're doing here is just replacing the app.jx code to make sure that we're referencing this blog page that we're going to be creating. And next we have to create that blog page, or create blog page. So in the front end folder here, I'm going to go ahead and click add a file. I'm going to go ahead and call that create blog page.jsx. And then we're going to go ahead and copy paste some code here, and I'll comment this or explain this code a little bit later. But what we're going to do is tab over here, and because we're changing a lot, the HOD module reloading isn't picking all of that up. But if we refresh here, you can see that this embedded Polaris UI is what we want the merchant to be able to fill in. So we got author, word count, article title, article short description. If we click this, we get this here. So what we want to do next is wire that up to our backend to receive all of this information and send it off to OpenAI and to Shopify. And to do that, we have to set up an API endpoint that can use this. So I'm going to go ahead and select global action here in gadget, and then under actions here, I'm going to go ahead and create a new one, and we're just going to create this, name this create blog. And this is a custom API endpoint, and whenever that gets called, we can go ahead and run some custom code. So to do that, under success effects here, I'm going to go ahead and select add code snippet, and that just creates a code file for us. And I'm just going to go ahead and bring that up to a full screen in our editor here. Now, if you prefer to use your own code editor, you can do that using the Gadget CLI file sync, which essentially syncs file between your local computer where you have your editor and Gadget, allowing you to code in your local editor, and Gadget is automatically syncing and updating those in real time. So you don't have to use this web editor if you don't want to. I'll leave a link in the description to that CLI file sync. So in this JavaScript file, we want to add the logic that receives the information from our embedded front end, sends it to OpenAI, gets that back, and then creates a blog article in Shopify. So again, I'm going to copy paste this and you have it in the video description, but I'm also going to walk through it to explain what it does. So first of all, I'm going to start at the bottom. What we have here is that we've defined what input this API endpoint can receive, and it just corresponds to what we have in here. Blog title, description, author, word count, image required, Boolean, true or false, and the image description. So we can essentially define what we want this API endpoint to receive or be able to receive. If you want to add something, you just add it in here and you can send more data. If we scroll up to the top, we can see at the very top, we're requiring an OpenAI NPM package. Gadget runs on Node, so we got a package.json where we'll add this npm package in a few minutes, and then all of the code that we're executing lives in this module exports function here where all of this runs. So what we're doing here is just first, all of the blog articles that exist in Shopify exists under these blogs. So whenever you create a blog article, it will live under a blog parent. You can think about the one that comes out of the box is called news, but say that you want to have different types of blogs, one that's called announcements or products or something else. You can create different blogs, and then the articles are stored under different blogs. So every Shopify store gets one called news out of the box. We're just going to be using that. And in order to create an article under that blog sort of parent, we need to have the ID for it. Just to show you sort of how that works, we're using this API, Shopify blog.findMany. We're going to be calling our internal data model here and fetch the blog that we have here. It's currently empty because we haven't synced any data. Gadget doesn't automatically sync data from Shopify when you install it, because we'll leave it up to you whether or not you think your application needs data or not. Whenever a webhook is emitted, we're automatically picking that up. But if you want to do this initial sync, just go into Connections, Shopify, and then you hit this sync button. And what Gadget does is that it downloads all of the data for any of the models that you have selected that you want to use, which means if we go back to our blog here, we can see that we have this one record called news. Now, we don't have any articles because we haven't created any ones, but I'll show you in a little bit, once we've created our article, how we can get it to show up here. Again, if you had added a product model, customer model, any other models, you would have those records here. And whenever Shopify emits webhooks, Gadget automatically picks those up and makes sure that your backend is up to sync with what's going on in Shopify. But back to the code file here in our backend, what I do next is that I just create this input values that have all of the input values, and some of them are formatted, so it just makes this a little bit simpler to access. And then next, we're just setting up our our OpenAI connection. We'll come back to add this OpenAI API key in a little bit, but this just sets up a connection that allows us to communicate with OpenAI's APIs. And that's what we're going to do next. Right here, we're going to be using the OpenAI create chat completion endpoint. We can think about it as an API endpoint for ChatGPT. It's a little bit different, but that's usually how I explain it. I'm using the GPT-4 model. I'll change this in the code file that I provide because not all of you have access to that. So this will probably be GPT 3.5 Turbo. And then we're essentially passing in what's called messages. You can think about this as prompts. We're just telling the AI that you're a helpful content creator helping to write blog articles for an e-commerce store. And then we're passing in the prompt here that is essentially write the body of a X words long blog article titled, and the title that the merchant is passing in. That is summarized as, and then the description. Return the blog without the title with HTML format like page headings, page breaks, etc. And then I'm passing in some default parameters that I'm using. If you're not sure what these are, go ahead and check this documentation that I provided here and make sure that they meet whatever the needs that you have are, and play around with them a little bit and figure out what makes sense for your use case. And then next, we're going to get ready to send this back to Shopify. But first, we're going to check, okay, did the merchant click this? I'm just going to go ahead and close this. Did the merchant click this checkbox here or not? Because if they did, we also want to generate an image. So if they did that, we're just going to go ahead and call OpenAI's create image endpoint. We're going to pass in the image description that the merchant provided, say that we want one image, and I've just chosen 1024 by 1024 in size. You can check the documentation, what you can change it to if you want something smaller. And what we get back from OpenAI is just a URL to the image that they generate. And that's perfect, because when we go ahead in the next step and generate a blog article in Shopify, we actually going to pass that image URL back into Shopify and say, create a blog with this image. And we're doing that with the Shopify.article create action here. And then here we got to pass in that blog ID that we fetched up here. And like I said, it's because any article that you generate has to live under a blog, and the news blog is the one that comes out of the box. So we're just passing in the ID for that news blog, and then passing in the author, title, the body HTML, which is just the blog itself. We're setting publish to false. That allows the merchant to review it before they decide to make it available publicly. And then we're passing in this image URL, and I'm just using the image description that the merchant put into the interface here as an alt text. And if the image has not been selected, the merchant doesn't want to generate one, we essentially do the same thing here, generating a blog article, but without the image. Once that is completed, Shopify has created this article. What I'm going to do is that I'm just going to pass back a little bit of information that allows the merchant access to this new blog article easily. So we're just going to create this little object here that includes the title that we just generated and this URL to easily take them to the part in admin where they can review, edit, and publish the article that they just created. And then scope.results here, I'm just passing that back so the front end gets that information and that it can display it. So we're almost ready to go ahead and create our blog article, but there are 3 things that we got to do before we do that, and 2 of them has to do with OpenAI. So like I said, we're using an OpenAI NPM package because Gadget has NPM package support. And what that means is that we can use an abstraction of the OpenAI API without having to code all of that from scratch. And to do that, we need to use their NPM package. So I'm just going to go ahead and search for OpenAI NPM. And we'll find this npm.js page here. And what we're looking for here is the version. So their current version is 3.2.1. So we're gonna go ahead and add a comma here and then say OpenAI : and then we'll add 3.2.1 here to make sure that Gadget installs the most recent package that is available at this time. It's gonna hit run yarn install, and that allows Gadget to install this package and have it available in your app. Now, I also said that when we run this, we need to have this API key from OpenAI. So the way that works is that we can use their API, but in order to use it, we need to have an account. And this account is different than using, say, ChatGPT. This is a developer account. So if you don't already have an OpenAI developer account, you have to create one. It's free to do. So let's go ahead and search for OpenAI developer. And we'll find this platform.openai.com. Let's click on that. I already have an account, so I'm signed in. If you don't have an account, again, it's free to create one. And I'm not sure if OpenAI still gives you free API credits when you sign up. They used to do that way back when. If they don't do that, you have to go ahead, and I still think that actually, even if they do, you have to go ahead and add a payment method on file, a credit card. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and click this View API Keys. Now, what we're going to use is only going to cost you a few cents, but I still suggest that you check the pricing and understand what you're doing here, and that you set the appropriate limits, etc., on your account so you don't get surprised by any large charges. You can do that here in the Manage Account section. But to get the API key, let's go ahead and click View API Key, and then you're going to create new secret key here, and then you name it. So I'm going to name it GPT-4 Blog Creator, and then create a secret key. This is only going to be visible once, so go ahead and copy it, then click Done, and then you can see it's no longer visible. It's just for safety reasons. And then in Gadget, you're going to go to Settings here. You're going to go to Environment Variables. You're going to hit Add Variable, and then you got to get this name correct. It's going to be OpenAI _ API _ key, and then paste these in here. Again, OpenAI _ API _ key. I have a bunch of other tutorials that uses OpenAI, and one of the most common cases of things not working is that this is not spelled correctly. Once you've pasted these in here, I suggest that you click this little padlock here to encrypt them. And if you want to make sure that you got this correct, go ahead and copy this. You can go back to onCreate blog here, the code file that you created, and you can see that if you search for it, it shows up here, which means that it is the same string as we put in the environment variables. And the reason that this needs to be exact is that when we create this configuration here, we're calling out to our environment variables, we're fetching that API key that you that you pasted in there. And if this isn't correct, we're not going to be finding that. We're just going to have an empty string. And when we call out to OpenAI, we're not providing them with an API key. And they're just going to say, sorry, if you don't have an API key, we're not going to be processing your API request. Okay, so now we've set up OpenAI. Great. Now we have one last step remaining. So when you create a embedded app UI in Shopify here, as well as having these custom API endpoints like this global action create blog that we created, Gadget doesn't automatically give anyone that is in here access to all of these API endpoints because we're not sure if that's what you want. So to make sure that the merchant has the ability to access this API when they hit this button, create blog, make sure that this gets passed here, we actually have to give them access to that. So do that by going to settings, and under roles and permissions, you can see that we have a couple of different roles here. And there's one that is called Shopify app users. So that's the role that is ascribed to anyone that uses an embedded Shopify app UI. And if we scroll down, you can see that that user has access to all of these various Shopify models that we have in here. And if you don't want that, you can unselect them. But at the very bottom, you can see global actions, create blog. This is not checked. So let's go ahead and check that. And now it means that the users that are using this interface, when they click it, they won't get an error because they're not allowed to access this API endpoint right here. Okay, so now all of that is set up. The last thing that we're going to do is just update the React code that has this, that wires this button up to the backend. So to do that, let's go to create blog page and paste that in. And the reason that I do it now is that if we had done it before we've created all of these other things, we would have gotten error saying like, hey, this endpoint is not available, etc. So that was not what I meant to paste. And here we have it. So this is just a very simple React component using some Polaris, which you can import a bunch of things. We have our own Gadget React package here that we use. We're setting up all of these states. If you're not familiar with React, you're not going to understand what this does. If you are, I think you will. But I'm just going to briefly walk through it. And then here you can see that we're just fetching the shop ID of the shop. We have tenancy enabled, so this is going to return the Shopify shop that has this app installed because it won't be able to access other store information. And then here you can see how we're using use global action from the Gadget package here, React package, to call api.createBlog, which is the endpoint that we created. And that is being called on this, where do we have it? This form on submit handles submit, and that function right here is just checking that we have all of the fields set to make sure that merchant has filled everything in. And then we have this create blog object here where we're passing in the blog title, blog author, word count, etc. And that just corresponds to what we had defined here. So if you want to pass in something more or something less, you can change this as well as changing what we have in here. And then the rest of it is just Polaris components that we've added some things to. These are just our text fields. and then we have some spinners, etc., that I'll show you. And then what we're going to do here at the very end is that we're just going to, when the blog post is generated, we'll show a banner with a link to the blog post, and also show an error if there is an error generating a blog post. We'll see if we get one. But this is essentially it. So I've shown you all of the code files that we're using. It's not that much for all of the things that we're getting done here. So let's go ahead and try to generate a blog article. So I'm not sure, sometimes the hot module reloader actually falls asleep. So I'm just going to go ahead and refresh the page here. And if you find that it's a little bit slow, we're using the development environment of your gadget app. That is a little bit slower because it has to take into account some of the stuff like the hot module reloading, but you can deploy this to production right here. You got to set up a production environment. Go and check our documentation. Just a one click deploy, and that sends it off. And if you use that, I would suggest that any merchant facing apps that you create, use the production environment. It's a lot faster, and then the load times in here are going to be a lot snappier. And again, check the documentation to learn more about that production environment you get out of the box as well. Now let's go ahead and try this. So I'm gonna type in some stuff here. Let's make this a 200 word count blog post. And instead of you seeing me type all of this, I'm just gonna go ahead and copy paste some stuff. So I'm gonna pretend that this is a outdoor kind of outdoorsy kind of shop. So I'm just pasting in an article title called "The Hiking Season is Here." Article short description is "The sun is out and it's time to get your boots and gear to get out hiking. If you need to replace your gear, make sure to check out our shop." Then we're going to generate an image, and it says "A beautiful North American mountain landscape with two hikers seen in the distance." Then we're just going to create blog here, and that can take about a minute because we're doing 2 OpenAI calls, one to generate a blog with GPT-4 in my case, that is typically slow, and then we're also doing an image generation. So I'm just going to shut up, and then we'll fast forward until this is complete, and we'll have a look at it. All right, so we can see there's a green banner. That's great. So it says your blog article, "The Hiking Season is Here," was created. Review and publish it here. So let's go ahead and look at that. And here we have it. You can see GPT-4 is pretty okay with generating blogs. I'm not going to read it. And then we have an image here. So I'm just going to toggle this to visible, click save, and then we can go ahead and view it. Maybe not the highest quality image, but you get the point. There are other APIs out there that you could be using. And with that click of a button, we now have a blog article that is live. It's really that simple. Now there's a couple of things that maybe you want to add some fields here. Maybe you want to be able to have tonality. Maybe you want to be able to choose products to incorporate. Maybe you want to choose which blog this should be published on. Very easy. Just add more Polaris components to capture that. You can use Gadget's internal API to fetch that information to display here. You don't have to call out to the Shopify API to get that and worry about rate limits, etc. Because this front end lives on Gadget, having access to the data in Gadget's database is the shortest route to getting that information. Now, what I wanted to show you as well is that we have this blog article in here. When we click data, we would maybe expect the blog article that we just created to show up here. Because Shopify doesn't have webhooks on blog articles, they don't have webhooks on everything, this doesn't automatically appear here. Now we have a daily reconciliation job that runs and picks up anything where a webhook has gone missing or failed. or cases where you're using models that doesn't have webhooks. So if we go in here and do a sync, it'll automatically show up. You can do these syncs programmatically as well. So if we wanted to, we could add an internal API call at the end of this script that automatically goes to Shopify and fetches any blog articles. There's documentation for how to do that in Gadgets docs. But if we go ahead and click on data here, we can now see that this appears right here. So if you wanted to, you could, for instance, change this UI that you created to, once this has been created, you do that sync, you get that article back, and you display it here using Gadget's internal data that you've synced, and allow the merchant to edit it and then go ahead and publish it by changing the status from to published in Shopify. So there's a lot of opportunities that you can do with extending this, but I'll sort of leave it at this very simple version to show you how easy it is to create this app with an embedded UI and using OpenAI and Shopify's APIs. And like I said previously, when you create an app or a Shopify app using Gadget, this is essentially ready to pass the technical requirements of the Shopify App Store out of the box. So you just have to think about what is it that you want your app to do, what you want the backend logic and the front end to look like, fix that, and then you can ship it to the App Store. Okay, that wasn't that hard, right? You did copy the code that I already written, but it took me about 2.5 hours to write that from scratch. So I think that you could also do this from scratch, or a different project from scratch, pretty easily as well. I'm not the best with JavaScript or React, so I actually use GPT-4 a little bit. But again, 2.5 hours for this kind of app is pretty nuts. If you have any ideas of how you want to extend this app, if you're going to end up using it, or if you have any other ideas, do let me know in the video comments. I would love to hear what you end up doing, or if you have any questions. And if you're thinking about building a Shopify app, I do recommend to check the Gadget hackathon that we're putting together. It's called the Future of Code. It's going to run from May 13th to 20th. That's a week. You can join and ship your app the first day. The last day, you don't have to participate the entire week, obviously. It's 100% free. It's 100% remote. And there's a total of $5,000 in prizes. So we got best overall project, best use of AI, most technically impressive, best Shopify checkout UI extension and Shopify function, prices for all of these. And I have tutorials of how to build these as well. So do go and check those out. And if you have any ideas for apps that you want to build, join the hackathon. Go to gadget.dev/hackathon to register for free today and join the fun in building some new cool Shopify apps. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel in case you want to get notified of future videos. But for this time, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you later. Bye.